What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Pitt mailbag here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. We are your Pitt beat reporters for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I am Noah Hiles. He is Chris Carter. And Chris, final week of the football regular season. Can you believe it's here?
Part of me, no. It still feels like this season should be in the middle part of it, but that's the thing when you're in the middle of football season, it flies by real fast. And then you're just like, what happened there? So, but I'm excited to get to see how this team finishes this season.
I got to tell you, I can believe that we are here. As someone who's been
You've been to
on the
every game.
road,
You've been on
yeah,
the road.
I think it's been 2 weeks since the second week of October. Or two, yeah. No, I don't even know what I'm saying. I have not been home very often, is what I'm trying to say. And I continually won't be home. I'm not complaining. I love traveling. But it's like, yeah, when you're making the trip out there for every football and basketball game, it feels like it's been a long season. That and the weather. It feels like it's late November football now that's being played. But we're flying through, and as always, we're going to answer your questions here. And we'll start off in the same note that we did in last week's mailbag, which has to do with recruits and lack thereof for the University of Pittsburgh. Brady wants to know what's up with all the decommits in the Pitt football recruiting class. Should we expect any more? So for those who are unaware, Zion Fowler, a 4-star receiver, announced his decommitment to Pitt. I believe that would have been on Wednesday of last week,
Yeah,
someday,
I think it
something
was Wednesday.
around that time. Um, Chris, or no, that would have been Menchie. So sometime last week, Zion Fowler decommitted from Pitt. And it would have been
Mm-hmm.
on Friday, I believe, because I just got home from the airport when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, he is the third Pitt player that was verbally committed to decommit. There was an offensive lineman. He was a low-level recruit. I think he was the lowest-rated recruit Pitt had in its upcoming class. He decommitted, and then, of course, Kenny Menchie and now Zion Fowler. So what's up with this one? Again, we don't have official answers on any of these things. We haven't been able to talk to any of these kids and find out their real reasoning. Not that they'd probably be willing to share it regardless. I don't think I'm out of bounds by assuming that this kid saw Kenny Menchie decommit and maybe he reconsidered things as well. Just because he's a receiver, seeing that high level quarterback back out, I don't think it's crazy to assume that a receiver said, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna see what other quarterbacks are elsewhere." Am I on the right track here, Chris? Do you think that that's a fair assumption?
Not only that, but I think they watch the games. These kids are looking at the stuff and seeing like, oh, they're not throwing the ball well. I do not want to go there and struggle for 4 years. So I think that's what it's a combination of things. I think Kenny Minchie, seeing that, he's probably like, yeah, I'm a follow that guy's lead and figure out some other place to go where I can be a star wide receiver. Look, this is the impact when things go bad in your program. Pitt basketball saw that last year. Juna Mintz was lined up to be the next great guard of Pitt basketball. They lose to the Citadel in week 1, and he decommitted the neck like 2 days later.
Yeah.
And it was just, and now he's playing for Syracuse. So like, this kind of stuff. This kind of stuff happens, and it's why it's important to finish strong even when you struggle. I think it's a big reason why Pitt fans, I think it's why these games actually matter. Like it's important that they've won these last 3 games. I think it's also important why they need to beat Miami and go to a bowl game and win there. Because I think there's guys, you got Jahsir Whittington, who's a 2024 commit, their lone 2024 commit. He's a 4-star defensive tackle. He could be the future of your defensive line there and give you the next potential superstar guy there. And if you suck, if you get embarrassed, these kids have every right to be like, you know what? Nah, I'm just not doing it. And they still got a lot of commits this year. They got Bryce Pollock, they got Isaiah Neal, Jordan Bays. They got a lot of guys that are committed to the 2023 class, and we'll see who else sign and everything. But absolutely, that was part of the impact there. And again, it's why every game counts. It's why you have to keep winning and you have to keep fighting. You start looking down, kids are going to look the other way.
All right, we move on now to bowl season. Nolan wants to know, what bowl game should we expect to see Pitt play in?
Gosh.
Nolan, I mean, I've said this, I think, on the college football show last week. One of my favorite things we have to read on our sports section is when Adam Bittner, our coworker, goes through and he gets the bowl projections from every national media site in the country, essentially. I love seeing where other people think they're going to go as far as Pitt goes. However, everyone seems to think in the national media that they're going to end up in the Pinstripe Bowl. I think there was one person who had them going to the Gator Bowl and then one to the Liberty Bowl, and that was it in this week's projections. I still think it's going to be the Sun Bowl. The Sun Bowl and the Gator Bowl were in attendance in Saturday's contest against Duke, and I think, with that kind of being a battle for second place in the Coastal, it made sense for them to be there kind of scouting those two teams. I'm rooting for either the Sun Bowl or the Gator Bowl or the Liberty Bowl simply because I don't want to have to go somewhere where it's cold to cover another football game. But the Sun Bowl, I think, makes sense. It's something Pitt's been connected to all season long, essentially. It's something that they're very familiar with, having played there twice since 2008. And I wouldn't be shocked to see them end up there. Chris, what about you?
I agree. The Sun Bowl sounds like it makes a lot of sense. I think the Duke's Mayo Bowl would be interesting. I also think that'd be a great place for you to travel because I went to Charlotte last year and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. It's always better to go to the nice weather cities, or at least the nicer weather cities. So all you Pinstripe Bowl people, get the heck out of here. We don't need that in Noah's life.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Pinstripe Bowl could be another thing too. I mean, that makes sense. I believe they went there the one year they went there, Narduzzi's first season. They were an 8-win team, so it makes sense to see them. I'm more on top of weather. Selfishly, I just want to see a good matchup, and so the Pinstripe Bowl would be against a Big Ten opponent. The Sun Bowl would be against a Pac-12 opponent, and the Gator Bowl, I believe, would be against either an ACC or a Big Ten. Or an SEC or a Big Ten, excuse me. So, I mean, those all three, I think, would be pretty exciting. We'll move on to our next question now. Tony wants to know, how many, if any, of the 19 seniors who walked Saturday afternoon do you see coming back for another year at Pitt? That's a very good question, Tony. I have the list right here as I scroll through my little notepad here. A lot of the guys I do think are done. I mean, even guys like Jake Cradle, who walked. I think Jake is a guy who he has another year of eligibility. I don't know. I could see him being done. Just saying he had a great football season. At the same time, he would be huge for Pitt if he came back. Same for Eric Hallett, who I personally think is done at this level. Vincent Davis, I think, is done at this level. If I had to pick one person who walked this senior day that will play another game for Pitt, actually, I'll pick two, and I think they play the same position. It's John Morgan and Habakkuk Baldonado.
That was where I was going.
Yeah, I think both of them gain so much.
Yeah.
Or have so much to gain from playing another good season at the collegiate level. I think both of them, if they had a good year this year, could have been, solid NFL draft prospects, but neither really had. I think Morgan's probably had a better year than Baldonado, but Baldonado is, I think, head and shoulders above Morgan as far as a prospect. I think both can return next year and look to have something similar to what Cansey did this year as far as a dominant season up front. And if they do that, they could be, second day picks in the NFL draft. And with an extra year of eligibility and, leadership roles on this team, I don't think it's out of the question for either one of them to return. Chris, do you have anything to add on that?
I mean, the biggest thing to me is, like, you're right. You got to make your you got to make your case clear to NFL teams that you're the guy. And when it came to sacks, Kalijah Cansey did his job, but I mean, you look at these numbers this year. Habakkuk Baldonado has 2 sacks. That's not at all what his potential is. And I say that because I've seen his potential. I've seen him ball out. Last year he was a dominant force. Last year I felt like this year was going to be a huge year for him. And up and downs happen. But last year he had 9 sacks, and he was one of those guys that I think a lot of NFL scouts were keeping an eye on. 2 sacks. Not that he won't get drafted if he went this year, but I think if he came back, I think that he would have a chance to put himself into that late day 2, early day 3 conversation, and maybe even higher if he goes ballistic. Kalijah Cansey, I think, is working himself up into the upper round 2 conversation if he keeps up what he's doing and if he's healthy. We got to see if he comes back from that injury that sidelined him in the middle of the Duke game. But Baldonado especially, and I think one thing that I'm interested to see if it works in Pitt's favor. I'm not guaranteeing that this is a formula that will work, but anybody who's on this team that was on this team last year saw Kenny Pickett go from being a late day 3 quarterback at best to being a first round pick because he
the
chose
first
to come
quarterback
back.
taken in the first round. The only
Exactly.
quarterback taken in the first round. Yeah.
Exactly. So like people, if anything, that should be such a selling point for Pitt right now to a lot of these seniors. Hey guys, I know that you think that this, but and I know that the money and the freedom is sitting right there for you. But if you come back, look, and you have a great year with us, look what can happen. And look at how close we are this year. Especially again, this is why you want to win 9 games. Pitt surge. I also think Pitt surge in 2020, 2 years ago, was it was something. It was a good sign for Kenny Pickett to say, you know what, we have talent here. I will come back and I can prove something. I think if they finish with 2 more wins, they finish on a 5-game win streak, a 9-win season. It might convince a Haba Baldonado. It might convince Eric Hallett, some of these guys, to be like, you know what, I need to improve. I want to make more money. I want to be a higher draft pick. I can stick around for another year and we can have some good times.
Especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean,
Especially on
assuming
defense.
Servassier Dennis comes back because he didn't walk Saturday. I mean, knowing that he's going to be back and Brandon Hill is going to be back. And
Yeah.
I mean, really, there is a chance the only 2 players this defense loses are Cansey and Deslin Alexander.
Yeah.
There's a chance the rest of that team is back, which that's a good defense. That's a really good defense. So moving forward now, you mentioned a guy, Kenny Pickett. Mike wants to know, do you think any Pitt players will opt out of playing in this year's bowl game like Kenny Pickett did last year? And if so, who? 2 names come to mind, I think. And both of them got banged up against Duke on Saturday. It's Cansey and it's Izzy.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that neither of them play quarterback, which is like the top spot to opt out of. However, the second position group that you see opting out the most is running back, which would make sense for Izzy to opt out. And I think Pitt will be fine even without Izzy. I mean, it beat the number 20 team in the country without Izzy at home earlier this month when he sat out against Syracuse. Rodney Hammond Jr. is a really good back, and they should be okay without him. Obviously, they are better with him, but they'll be all right without him. Both of those guys, though, I mean, they're not that Kenny was, I guess, the same way, though. Like, Kenny was a gamer, but he made a decision about his future. Wouldn't be shocked to see Izzy do it. Cansey, just a different position. I don't know. But if he's already got a lingering injury, I wouldn't be shocked to see him either. Chris, could you see anyone else?
Those are the main 2. I mean, like, if Eric Hallett thinks that it's his time, maybe him.
Eric Hallett has something to gain, though, from having a good bowl game, I think.
Right. No, I agree with that. And I think that's the thing is that Israel Bonacon and Kalijah Cansey. Well, see, I do think that Kalijah Cansey has something to gain from a good bowl game, because if he put on another star performance, because if he gets, say he plays in this next game, say he comes back this week
against Miami,
and he gets another sack or a sack and a half, he'll have 9 sacks, 8.5 or 9 sacks. He could end up with a double-digit sack season, and that can raise his profile. I think that alone might also help him. Say if he does that on a big stage too, and they win a bowl game, and he makes a big play, that could be something that goes forward. But granted, like you said, if he's banged up, he's like, you know what, I'm making the money. I also think 2 warning signs. We talked about the good signs that Pitt can use. 2 warning signs that Pitt can use is go look at Jalen Twyman. Look where that
was an entire season, not.
That was an entire season, sure, but but he missed an opportunity. Look at Paris Ford. Guys sticking with it again. Yeah. Paris Ford, mid season, but maybe look at it and say, you know what, hey guys, use every opportunity in college football to compete. And granted, Kenny Pickett did it last year and was just fine. But Kenny Pickett was also 3rd in Heisman voting, and neither of these guys are like that.
And that's what I would say is these are the 2 Pitt players who are going to get the most accolades this year. Right. Cansey is, I think, a lock to be an All-American, be it first or second team in pretty much every national publication and poll possible. Cansey is going to be an All-American. And Izzy, I don't know if he's going to be an All-American, but he's definitely going to be first team All-ACC. I think he will get honorable mention, All-American recognition in some places. And aside from those 2, I mean, you might get Servassier Dennis getting some attention. That's about it. That's
Yeah.
about it. So I would just say that those two, yeah, they're not what Kenny was last year as far as, top 3, 4 players in the country, but they're in that upper echelon where they really don't have it. I mean, one more great performance would be fantastic for both of them, but I think that even if they didn't play against Miami this Saturday and didn't play in the bowl game, I think that their body of work this fall has done enough for them personally. So we'll move on now to basketball. Amy is one of many people who asked me this question, and boy, oh boy, did I get this question asked to me a lot Wednesday and Thursday night. Is there any chance?
Ah,
This was Wednesday and Thursday night when I was in Brooklyn last week. Is there any chance Pitt fires Jeff Capel before this season ends? Question mark. Amy, I mean, I guess there's a chance. I don't see it happening. His buyout goes down by like $10 million, isn't that right?
yeah,
Something like that.
yeah,
At the end of this year.
yeah.
And just in general, looking at it, I'll admit it, Capel has not done a great job at Pitt.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Everyone can see that.
you can admit that, right? But assuming they do move on, there's no one in the country who can just make this team good next year.
Right.
Make them a tournament team. I mean, there are a couple people. Like if Cal Perry came here, sure, he could bring a whole bunch of 5-stars in. But like, they're not going to get that.
No.
Everyone's clamoring for Brandon Knight. Brandon Knight would take 4 years to make this a winning program as well. The problem is it's been 5 years and they're not really making any progress. So yeah, that's definitely worth moving on from possibly. Like if they don't have another good year, if they finish with another losing record, sure, it might be a good decision to get rid of Capel. But whoever you bring in, whoever Pitt's really capable of bringing in, it's going to be a 4-year turnaround. That's just the reality of it. And there's a chance that at the end of that 4-year window, the team still might not be good. So what I'm trying to say is you got to let him at least finish the year out here, because a mid-season change isn't going to do anything but lose you the 3 recruits that you landed, who are all pretty good basketball players in my opinion. Chris, do you see them doing this mid-season?
I have a hard time seeing it doing a mid-season because, again, like you said, the buyout, the buyout lessens by $10 million at the end of the season. So there's a protection that Jeff Capel has, and I think that's been a big protection for him so far with all the stuff that's gone on. But like you said, they got 3 recruits coming down the line. Jeff Capel, when he was hired, he was the guy. He was the wow. Pitt never gets these type of coaches, the up and comers that are looking to prove themselves. And it was a huge win. And also, I'll say this: as much as Jeff Capel hasn't fixed the program, he's fixed a lot of things that people don't see. Like, I've talked to players who were just like, when Kevin Stallings was there, like they sat in like recliners and ate popcorn when they watched film, and it was just like not serious, and just like the things that didn't happen in practice, and then the things that were just culture to some of these guys. It was so hard to get out of it. And so then when Jeff Capel come in, he had to sweep in a whole new series of practices, a whole new culture, and reestablish a lot. And he hasn't done everything he's supposed to. I'm not making an excuse for Jeff Capel. I'm just saying people think that this is the bottom of the barrel. He got it from the bottom of the barrel. He doesn't raise it up too high. Like, he's gotten up like 1 or 2 steps from there. But I do think that he's improved it from the Kevin Stallings days. And people who think that I'm crazy, go back and look at how many conference wins he had in 2 years. Jeff Capel's had more than that every single year that he's coached Pitt. So, I think that Jeff Capel, it's fine if they move on from him after this year, and once the buyout comes down, because he hasn't had the success. But I don't think they're going to rush it right now. I also think that they respect, like this was a very tough situation they were put into. But, also I think, and Doug Whaley made this point on the Final Word with me on Sunday. He was like, you remember when Pitt fans were all about getting rid of Jamie Dixon because he couldn't win the big one, because he couldn't get rid of, and look where Pitt basketball is. And he said, remember that when people say fire Pat Narduzzi, because yeah, sure, they're not going to be national contenders. They're not going to make the college football playoffs until maybe they get to the 12 teams, if they have another Kenny Pickett, Jordan Addison like season, which I'm not sure if that happens again. But 8-9 wins. This is, if they win Saturday against Miami, this is the 5th 8-win season out of his 8 seasons in coaching Pitt. That's really good from where it was before he got there.
Yeah.
And he picked them up. If you want to see Pitt football fall into the even worse, into a despair, look what happened to Pitt basketball and kind of realize that. And I think that at the same time, respect what it takes to get them there in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, the Narduzzi thing, that's something I've always thought too. You know, people romanticize the Wannstedt years and the Walt Harris years. And don't get me wrong, there were some exciting games that were played under those head coaches, and they definitely got higher end talent locally. You know, those guys, the Doran Dickersons, the Darrell Reeveses, who everyone watched play here since they were 14 and they went on to become stars of Pitt, which we don't really see as often anymore under Narduzzi. But the program has been so much more consistent. I know that got off track a little bit, but I felt the need to add that in.
No, that's fine.
Last question here. Doug wants to know, what's the biggest strength of this year's Pitt basketball team? I don't seem to recognize one through 5 games.
I was going to say, you tell me, buddy.
We don't either. I don't know what this team is good at. I can tell you what it isn't good at. There's a lot.
Everything.
And I'm not trying to dog on Pitt basketball.
But it's been rough.
They just don't really have an identity right now. I think there are opportunities for it to have an identity. I think if Fetty and Hughley play well, which they haven't played well in the same game yet. Hughley, I thought, was really, really good for what he was able to do, still recovering from an injury against Alabama State Sunday afternoon. And I think Fetty's had some good moments as well, especially against Tennessee Martin. But if you can get both of them playing a solid game together, along with one of the Diaz-Graham twins chipping in time off the bench, then you might have a great front court, or maybe at least a good front court. I think their back court has just been bad altogether this year. There's been spurts where Cummings looked okay. I thought Cummings looked okay in the second half against Alabama State. Greg Elliott had a good first half against West Virginia. But overall, the ball movement's not there. They turn the ball over way too much, and they're not making shots. So I can't say it's a guard heavy. I think they have experience, and maybe that's what defines this team. But through 5 games, they've won 2. They've lost in 3 blowouts, or 2 blowouts, excuse me, and one close one. I don't think they have any identity as a team. Chris, I guess I'll rephrase the question and ask you this as we wrap it up. In order to win, when this team's winning, what is its identity?
Feed the big man inside, and then and then hope that Fetty and Jorge and eventually Guillermo, that can all kind of find ways to win inside and find their confidence. It took John a while to figure out how to score from the inside. When he first got to Pitt, anytime you got him the ball, he got so excited he forgot what to do. And it took him time to kind of figure out his pace and how to be a big man. And John's different. He's thick. He's 6'9". He's not long. But, there's ways to win with length. And there's ways to win, with that. Mahamadou Gueye was a very good transfer for Pitt basketball last year. And he was very much the kind of build of Fetty. So he had more of a shot. He could score from outside. He could drive a lot better than Fetty. But still, there's ways to win inside. And I think with those guys with height, you can use those to your advantage. You can own the paint a lot better this year. And if you own the paint, that makes it easier for your guards and everyone else to kind of roll around and get more aggressive with their cuts and their backdoor screens and things like that. If they start doing those things, I think so. If one good thing happens for Pitt basketball, other things can come from it. But you need someone for it to revolve around. When Justin Champagnie was at his best, everyone played better because of him. Everyone fed off that energy. I think if John Hughley can get healthy and he can start dominating the paint again, that's going to allow everyone else to kind of feed off of it and start to have success in the backcourt and on the wings.
All right, before we wrap up, got to give a shout out to a couple of other Pitt programs here. We didn't get any questions about them, but the women's volleyball team, who's always a top 10 team in the country, it seems, they play Wednesday at the Peterson Event Center. Right before they gear up for their national tournament run, which will be exciting to cover. And the men's soccer team is in the Sweet 16 for the 3rd straight year. They beat Akron 3-0 on Sunday. They play Kentucky. So look out. I'll have a story on them coming out sometime this week. And they play Kentucky at 6 o'clock on Sunday in the Sweet 16. the soccer spirit is in the air. The beautiful game, football. Chris Carter, watch some of it if you can. That's all I got. Chris, any final words?
Oh, soccer. I'm sorry. What happened?
All right. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Refer us to some friends or even some enemies, as long as they'll watch the content. Read our stuff on the Post-Gazette's website, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.